So we're here to talk about one of my frequent topics, that's bits. And here it's finding the most effective bit for a specific horse at a specific time in her career. Betty, who's a 3.5-year-old half draft mare, came in here. She had been ridden in a snaffle. So I tried a succession of bits till I found one that really seemed to suit her best. And it's not a snaffle, by the way. So this was the first bit we tried on her. This is my go-to bit for young horses. It's a Greg Darnell D-ring. Real good bit, but it's a 5-inch mouthpiece. She's a big mare. She's got a good sized head, good sized mouth. This was tight on the sides, and while she tolerated it, I didn't think it was the best fit for her, and I thought it might eventually cause some difficulties. So I picked up a second snaffle bit, because most of my snaffles are 5-inch, because most of the horses that I use, 5 inches generous. This is a bit by another maker, Jeremiah Watt. He has done an interesting thing. He makes some really high-end custom bits, artistic pieces, but he also has a production set of bits that are really quite nice, but they don't have the cost, they don't have some of the detail, they don't have some of the artistry, but they have the design, which he's so good at. So this is a 5 1/4 or 5 3/8 in the mouthpiece, and it fits her. And it's got an interesting configuration here because it is a basically round ring, but it's not free. It rotates, but it doesn't spin around like the typical loose ring snaffle would. So it's really not an egg butt because it is round. It has a joint here, but it's a fixed joint. Kind of gives you the best of both worlds. I like the bit, but when I used it on her and got to know her a little better, I realized that she really was ready to graduate from a snaffle. I know there's a whole school of thought that says I never want to use anything on my horse but a snaffle. You shouldn't move out of a snaffle till your horse is perfect in the snaffle. But in the real world, sometimes the biggest thing a horse learns from a snaffle is how to lean on it after a certain point in time. This is a big, strong mare, and the one thing I'm noticing with the draft cross is, in all things, they're not afraid to push a little bit. I think it's almost genetic that, you know, she had to learn to step over because she would move into pressure. Same way when you take a hold of her, she's just a little heavier. Not substantially, but enough so I didn't want her learning to lie on this bit. She had developed a habit of kind of dropping her head like this, and her head probably weighs 80 pounds, and trying to pick her back up was kind of an exercise in futility, and I didn't want that to progress. I think it's something that sort of started when she was just riding from point A to point B on the ranch. She got into that habit, nobody worried much about it. I'm kind of particular, so I thought, time to eradicate that. So I thought I'm going to go out of the snaffle, and this is a bit that is kind of my go-to transitional bit because it is a leverage bit of sorts. This is a bit that has a large ring and a very short purchase, the piece from the middle of the mouthpiece to the ring attachment at the top is the purchase. And this, technically, you could call it the shank. It is certainly the lower component of the cheek of the bit. Here's what's interesting. The purchase length is almost as long as the bottom of the ring. Aha. So that tells me that the mechanical advantage here when you use a curved strap or chain as a fulcrum is going to be very low. But it doesn't end there. Consider this. When you take a hold of the horse's mouth, the rein is going to rotate up to about here. So your mechanical attachment point is only that long, not that long. It's almost in equipoise there. So what that tells me is that this bit has no real mechanical advantage to it. It's not a force multiplier. And that is why I think it's so well tolerated by young horses, is if you pull with 1 pound of pressure, you get 1 pound of pressure here. Now, you might say, isn't that what a snaffle bit does? Absolutely. But this still is a lever. It still has a fulcrum in the form of this curb chain, so that it compresses different places, even though there's no force multiplication. And I find that it is a great transition bit because you start using their chin groove, you start using the bars of their mouth more than you do with the snaffle. You still work a bit on their lips. You're not anywhere close to the palate, and they're pretty comfortable with this. Now, why this bit that was made as a transition bit for colts has a correction type mouthpiece in it is a little bit of a mystery to me. I probably would have been happier if it just had like a Mullen or a medium port or a jointed mouthpiece like your typical ring snaffle. But it's made with this mouthpiece, and initially I thought, that's a lot of bit to go to. Is it going to work? I've used this on dozens of young horses, and they really tolerate it well. There's some nice things about it. One is, this is big and fat. That's soft. And if you look at the bottom of the correction piece of the mouthpiece there, where the port connects, it is perfectly smooth. A lot of correction bits, the little buttons that attach the port to the mouthpiece are prominent, and they will work on the horse's tongue when you take a hold of them. These are completely buffered by that nice, smooth, round, large diameter. And it's a big tongue relief kind of a port in the correction shape. But I've found it's a real effective bit to go to. And if you watch any of the more recent videos and you got sharp eyes, you'll see that this is the bridle I've been using on her for a while, and she's beginning to be softer. She is more respectful of it, but is absolutely not the least bit intimidated. So this is a good transition bit. This is the direction I'm going to go with Betty. Conceivably, I might go back to a snaffle at some point if it seemed useful, and eventually I'll step her up to a different shank bit. Some folks like to rotate bits more frequently. I've struck up an acquaintanceship with Tim Anderson, really fine horseman. His routine is, I don't think he ever uses the same bit in a horse more than 3 days in a row. So he might go from one snaffle to another snaffle for a different feel. He might transition to a curb for a day or two, go back to a snaffle to make adjustments. A lot of rotation. I'm not quite as adamant about rotating bits, but that's an interesting point of view, that every time you change bits, you educate the horse a little different. It's a little different conversation. For now, I'm happy with the conversation I'm having with this little colt starter bit, actually designed by a really good performance horseman who is also a pretty talented bit maker, musician, artist named Randy Paul. Very, very, very talented guy who came up with this design, and it's been a mainstay for me for quite a while. You could also use this on an older horse who doesn't need a lot of bit, who maybe isn't comfortable in a lot of bit. So this is referred to as the Randy Paul Colt Starter. Came from the Bob Avila collection. They were not the most popular bits, so they're hard to find. I've got 2 of them. I ain't giving them away. Don't call me, you can't have mine. But hopefully, if you need one, you can find it. So, good bit. Let me know what you guys like to go to when you make a transition. By the way, I'm not dipping my toe into the bit versus bitless controversy or difference of opinion that exists. If you say, well, no bits are any good, then don't use a bit. I'm going to keep on doing what I'm doing, and you can do likewise. Thanks.